Hello, and welcome to the eighth episode of House, the Shared Living podcast. I'm Deanie Lee from the Property Marketing Strategists.
Dan Smith from Student Housing Consultancy.
And I'm Sarah Canning from the Property Marketing Strategists.
So, firstly, we want to wish a very happy Easter to all those observe, and we hope everyone enjoys the weekend. So, to keep with the theme of Easter, why don't we find out what your favourite Easter egg is? Come on, Sarah, you must have one, I'm sure.
Well, I was thinking about this, and I don't eat dairy. And quite frankly, dairy-free Easter eggs are quite rubbish. And they taste quite plastically, quite synthetic. So I go for the really posh dark chocolate ones, ideally. Something like Hotel Chocolat that's really rich and lovely. But yeah, gone are the days when I remember I used to get you remember those Smarties eggs where they have the Smarties in the middle of the egg? And then I used to break it up. And then I'd keep it in my fridge for ages and just nibble at it. No, that doesn't happen anymore. It won't last no more than 2 or 3 days. But yeah, that's what I like, the posh ones.
The wonders of intolerances as you get older, eh? Mine would be your bog standard Cadbury cream egg, but yeah, I'm quite lucky. My mum always sends me she sends me a Cadbury advent calendar or a Cadbury Easter egg or whatever it might be. So yeah, I'll go with pretty standard. But yeah, no, she's always done that. And then there's the odd year that she forgets, and there's absolute uproar in our family if mum forgets the advent calendars or the Easter eggs. So bless her, she does tend to remember now.
I don't think I've had one for the very reason that you just said, Sarah, that if you're vegan and you don't have dairy, they're pretty rubbish, really. And that's coupled with the fact that my dad was a market trader who sold sweets. So Easter was a really, really, really busy time. And our garage was full to the brim of sweets and chocolates. And I was never allowed to eat any because it was profit margin. So we didn't have chocolate in the house apart from the garage being full of it. And when I did get Easter eggs, I'd make them last till Christmas because then I could have some chocolates. And I still try and make my kids do that. They hate me for it. Yeah, I tried not to make them eat it all on day one.
Delayed gratification. It's impossible to teach kids that, to be honest with you. But yeah, good stuff. What have you both been up to this week?
I think the highlight for me, I don't know, Dini, if you would agree, is that we attended the COM1 conference, which was hosted by Michelle Carville and Gemma Butler, who are behind Can Marketing Save the Planet podcast, and they've also written 2 wonderful books about marketing with sustainable messages. And it was the first one, hence it was called COM1, and it's kind of a bit of a take on COP28 or wherever we are. So it's intended to be the first of a series of conferences. And it was nice not being around real estate property people because it really gave us a breadth of different industries and different learnings.
It was a really, really good event. And I think it was just really inspiring that it was a small amount of marketeers, but it was a good room of marketeers that were focused on trying to make businesses sustainable and profitable. And I think that is the key thing, is that actually you can do both and there is ways to do both. So it was a really great place to be, really, I think, and quite inspiring to go.
I've read Michelle's books, and I think there's so much potential there in terms of marketing, not just in terms of how we talk about sustainability, but what, the role that marketing can actually play in positively impacting environmental, social, and governance areas of running a business. What were the sort of main takeouts?
One thing that was a bit of a light bulb moment for me was we talk a lot about saving the planet and net zero and carbon reduction, but that's really intangible. What do all of those statements actually mean? And the general thought of the room is that consumers don't believe them with statements such as those. So you really need to boil it down to what matters to the consumer in almost like the lowest denomination. What matters to them locally, what matters to them, to their demographic, rather than these big messages.
So I think for me, it was the collaboration piece that I think marketing is a central part of that communication piece and that way to move forward. But I think there's also an element that actually you can't do it as a silo department. You've got to engage with everyone. You've got to make sure that there is that wider vision that everyone's aligning to and everyone's doing their bit and trying to do that bit. And I think the other thing that I was going to say is that I think from a real estate perspective, there wasn't lots of real estate there. It was a lot of already organisations that are already on, that have been developed as a B Corp or very much trying to do. I think there's one or two like industrial manufacturers there that are trying to be more sustainable. But I guess ultimately to have that impact, you need to get people who haven't really started that journey, don't know where to start that journey, to inspire them to do more. And I think that hopefully as the kind of the trend and ethos grows and develops, that we'll see more of that people go there on a fact-finding mission, not just because they're already doing great things and on that journey.
I think there's a real misconception on what, ESG or sustainability really means and who we should be talking to. And I don't think enough operators are actually talking to their residents about sustainability or communicating, what that should mean to them or how they can have a positive impact on their residents' lifestyles. I think there's a real focus on the B2B side, and in particular the investor side of sustainability. And that's borne out in GRESB scores and, CREM and Fitwell and BREEAM and all of the usual certifications. And there's a few ESG reports being put out there. I've commented on LinkedIn about UPP and Unite and Empiric and a few others. But what's been really good for me to see more recently is that there are more operators starting to just talk about, the B2C impact of sustainability and ultimately how they can talk to their residents. So just look at what they're doing at Meath Student Living, that which is backed by Aberdeen, huge firm, but they've gone for B Corp pending at the moment. Should be through. I would have thought their certification will be through any day now, actually, because it was about a year ago that they put their application in. They're really starting to think outside the box. Their website is, very much designed to use the minimum amount of energy and electricity possible, both in terms of where it's hosted, how it's displayed, the technology that it's using, even down to the colours of their branding. And I think that's something that we do need to push a lot harder, because the reason that I got into sustainability and set up Good Management Group was because I wanted to have an impact on as many people as possible, a positive impact on as many people as possible. So chose professional sport and real estate as the two areas to go into, because there's so many end users that you can have a positive impact on and really change their lifestyle to be more sustainable, more ethical. So it's been good to see the likes of Meath and several others as well. I think Homes for Students are also B Corp pending, but I think it's about time that we started talking about it more. In the work that we've done with the likes of Downing and Project Student and a few other clients, we've worked on signage, we've worked on communication, we've really tried to make sure that they can display and explain the impacts and what that actually means to their residents and how they can change their behaviours to not just save the operator money. That messaging is definitely not going to land well, but to reduce energy usage or water usage or reduce waste to landfill, whatever it might be. So lots of potential there. I think we're just scratching the surface, but the more we can see those sort of initiatives go out there, the better. And I think that's something that will start to come about more now.
That comes back to sort of my earlier point, Dan, really, is if you want to communicate successfully to the consumer, you've got to give them a why and a belief that they can make a difference. I think we're probably all guilty of just telling people to use less water to help save the planet. Okay, but what does that mean? How is it helping to save the planet? And can you communicate that in a better way? But also, to Dini's point about collaboration, we talked a lot in COM1 about the fact that a sustainability strategy is your business strategy. It's not a separate strategy. And marketeers need to be involved in those conversations. They need to know exactly what's going on, when, by who, how, so that they can communicate it internally and externally. And they need to be empowered as well. We talked, didn't we, Dini, about the power of the consumer and encouraging people to challenge. Well, if the consumers are challenging, the marketeers have got to be ready to challenge back and accept the challenge, because otherwise the consumers are challenging a brick wall, and we need to open up this two-way conversation. We need to be allowed to be criticised. We need consumers to push and champion, but also to challenge when it's not right and something better can be done. So as I said, scratching the surface, there's lots more to do. Deanie, what else did you take from the event?
Well, I was just following on from your point there, Sarah, is I think and I think we spoke about this at the event about the education piece. And actually, I think there's an education piece about educating people in sustainable practices and how to be sustainable, and also a kind of critical thinking piece in the next generation to actually question what they're being told by businesses, question the facts and the figures in the sense that, well, is this green, or are you taking one stat and shift it around the other way? So it's just asking more of the businesses that we're consuming. And actually, and I think I've said in a previous episode, I've recently worked on the new marketing apprenticeship for entry-level marketeers. And one of the key elements in that qualification was around sustainable marketing and how to be sustainable marketing, and that was a request by the government, so all credit to the department that actually we had to put it in already, but they wanted to make sure it was beefed up enough to make sure that was a key part of it. And I think there's more education in this area, and hopefully that is filtering through all subjects, not just marketing, that you are going to have a bunch of consumers that are questioning more, asking more, and expecting more. And we need to make sure that we can deliver to do that, and as you say, challenge them and move the dial forward.
All credit to the government. That is not a phrase that we're used to hearing very often.
So Dan, you were at MIPIM recently. Was sustainability on the agenda there at all? What vibes were you getting from the audience and the organisers there?
Yes, I was at MIPIM, but let me just caveat that in that I didn't go into the event. Ultimately, I decided quite last minute that I should be there to really sort of get a bit closer to the money. Now, MIPIM is a huge real estate investment event, and there are investors from all over the world there who are they're looking for innovation, they're looking for deals, they are looking for the next location that will be, primed and ready for them to deploy capital. Ultimately, it's full of blue suits and gilets, and it was probably 95% male, I would say, although there's apparently there's an increasing contingent of women there, and there's a lot of agencies. So the likes of Colliers or Knight Frank or Savills will send their teams en masse down to Cannes, and I decided to go out there because I thought I would get a bit closer to the money, find out what they're looking for and, where they're looking to buy and build, because student housing consultancy pretty much sits between investors and operators in a bit of a sweet spot, helping them with asset management and sort of operational best practice. So for me, I set up 6 different meetings before I went, and then had about 6 or so while I was out there, just sort of impromptu meetings, and didn't get close to the bunker, as they call it, which is the Palais. It was initiation by fire. I had sort of 24 hours to have my meetings, get in, get out, and I loved it because it was all about the networking for me. From a sustainability standpoint, I do think that there are good sessions within the bunker, within the actual event. I looked at I'd missed most of them. By the time I'd got there on the Thursday, I'd missed most of the good events. And also the tickets are pretty pricey. So if you're going for 24 hours, you might as well just be in Cannes. If you're going for the whole week, I think it's definitely worth getting a ticket. And so that's something that I will probably do next time around. But this was more about the networking for me.
And would you say, kind of, that you look back on it, that your 24 hours was worth it, the financial commitment, the time out of the office, the richness of the conversations that you were able to have there? Or did it feel very rushed? That's the kind of impression that I get kind of from social media, is that everyone's rushing from place to place and you're having quick chats rather than meaningful conversations.
I think it's introductions. A lot of it is introductions, or knowing that people will be in the same place at the same time as you, and that you want to put a face to the name and actually meet someone. For me, it was pretty hectic. I was in and out relatively quickly, but had enough time to socialize as well. And I think that's when the real business gets done. But I set up my meetings deliberately in the same kind of place where I knew everyone would be. And there's effectively a square called La Croisette, and a sort of long promenade that you can walk along, and people will just come and say, hey, I've seen you on LinkedIn, or we've been meaning to catch up for ages. Let's just have a quick chat. And then you can take things forward from there. So for me, it was about showing my face and making sure that a student housing consultancy and good management group was represented, and and ultimately that I was able to say, yes, I've been to MIPIM, I've had a good look around in Cannes, I've met enough people that it made it worthwhile. And I don't know if it's my previous background as a sports travel agent, but I managed to get a pretty good deal, all in and out, for about 370 something pounds. Yes, that was only for one night, but there are people spending thousands to be there. I just don't think you need to do that. I stayed on a boat in Cannes, right next to the venue, near Cafe Roma or Mar Nolan's, which is the Irish bar where everybody seems to end up. And that worked perfectly for me. So I was able to conduct some good business, meet some really good people, have some good food and a few drinks, nothing major, and then get out of there. That worked really nicely for me. But like I said, next year I think I'll extend my stay a bit.
Did you get a sense that, to be completely frank, when you said you're going to Cannes, I think my response was, love to go to Cannes, hate to go to MIPIM. And I was hoping you were going to come back and say to me, no, it's really changing. It's really, it is inclusive. And actually kind of all the posts I've seen on LinkedIn is not really telling me that, and actually is informing what my initial thought was is actually truth. So is there any sense that there is a way to try and change that image, or people want to change that image? I guess the one sad thing that I've seen in that is that lots of women have talked about how they felt it and how there needs to be change, but I haven't seen as many men doing that. And I guess that's where the change is going to come from. And yeah, it's just interesting to see whether you got a sense that any men felt that actually this needs to shift.
I think the event are really trying to do their best in terms of the female contingent of panelists or speakers. And Sanna Marin, the ex-Finnish PM, she was the keynote speaker. And that really, I think, set the tone for the way that MIPIM were organising the event itself. Doesn't change the fact that there were tens of thousands of real estate pros there in their blue suits, gilets, and Ray-Bans. And it was pretty shocking, actually. I know that we are stereotyping here, but that's what it was. If you just had a look in Cafe Roma, everyone was in a blue suit, all male, a few women here and there, but it very much felt like a representation, unfortunately, of the agency and investment world. And we all know that is a struggle to really make sure that there is more representation, more female representation, and more gender equality across the board within investment and the sort of commercial agency space. I do think that, some of the commercial agents are doing better there, and that will continue to change. The more that we talk about it, the more that everyone flags it, the more that people will think, okay, we don't need another blue suit going to MIPIM. Why don't we change things up and take a different team, different genders, different whatever? Like, I think that's the key thing, that we've got this opportunity to change the industry for the better. But it was very, very investment heavy, very, very male dominated. I just think that's a reflection of where the industry is at.
I think I saw some really, really great female-led events. There were lots of women in property events, and they organised a big kind of photo call, which was bright coloured people not in blue suits. And I think that's wonderful. And from what I've seen, those events were really, really well welcomed and really well attended. But it's a shame that they have to be there. It's a shame that there have to be female-only events just to make women feel that they found their people, that they found their tribe, to try and take away some of that intimidation away, because those events are intimidating, they're big. And I think, to your point, Dan, if the industry isn't reflective of an equal and diverse society, then it's hard for those businesses to push women into that situation, because they're just not there. There's the senior leadership. It just seems like there's still so much more to do. It's great that the organisers were trying to develop it, though. But I think for Dini and I, there are other events that we feel we would benefit from more. Because, and I wonder if you two agree with this, is there a tendency with events to gravitate towards the people you already know, because that's your safe space? And I feel like if we were to go to MIPIM, we would probably gravitate towards our safe space, the people that we already know, and it would be lovely to see them and catch up with them, but we don't have to go to MIPIM to do that.
Yeah, I totally I appreciate that. I made a conscious decision to meet new people, so I made sure that each of the don't get me wrong, there were a couple of meetings where I already knew them, but equally there was more to talk about, and I made sure to turn it to business reasonably quickly, and then do the social thing as well, and make sure I'm finding out a bit more about them, doing the usual networking. But yeah, there can be a bit of a tendency to do that, and that can lead us to be in a bit of an echo chamber. And roughly half of my meetings were actually with women, and the three people that I didn't manage to catch up with were all women as well. That wasn't a conscious decision. I'm literally realizing that as I'm talking. But I was sat talking to a bartender, actually, waiting for someone to arrive, and they were just trying to understand exactly what MIPIM was. They were relatively new to the area, and in my pidgin French, I was trying to translate in my head that it's very male dominated, and obviously I suppose the term for that is sausage fest. So it ended up, me explaining a fête de saucisson to this French bartender. And that's exactly what it was still like. It was the event seemed to be focused on that. And I think consequently, you're not going to get much change as well. Yeah, there was a whiskey and real estate event and things like that. That's not saying that women can't be involved in whiskey tasting. I know plenty that would enjoy that. But it definitely needs to become a bit more accessible. But you're back to your point on the speaking to people that you already know. I think there's always a tendency to do that. But if you're really out there for business development, then you have to put yourself out there and kind of get out of your comfort zone and speak to people that you don't already know. But it's like in my year abroad in France, I lived in Bordeaux, taught English in a French school, had English friends, and played a bit of football with a French football team. But typically I was speaking to people that I knew every weekend rather than really challenging myself. That was fine because I didn't need to earn money out of the back of that. I was grossly overpaid and underworked on that year, which was wonderful. The same can't be said for now being a consultant. I actually have to do that business development work. So whilst it's nice being in Cannes, speaking to people that I already know, like your Paddy Allens and your Kevin Redmonds, and it was really important to me to speak to new people and drum up more business, and managed to do that, closed one contract, and I've got sort of 3 different contracts that I'll probably follow up on, or that I am following up on, and hopefully should sign fairly soon. So definitely productive from my point of view. It's about what you do with it once you get back. That's the most important thing. I've shown my face, I've turned up. Next year I definitely get a ticket, but this year it just felt like I needed to do a bit of a smash and grab.
Well, let's watch this space and see whether we do end up there, Sarah. I'm not feeling it at the moment, but maybe I'll change my mind.
You would add some colour. You would certainly add some colour to it. Yeah, so
we'll see.
It's worth considering.
That's great. And I think just to bring it back a bit into kind of the shared living and PBSA, there was news in Ireland a few weeks ago around the lease lengths and actually making it compulsory for a 40-week lease for student accommodation in the planning constraint. And I thought it might be good to have a quick chat about our viewpoints on that and what we think the impact of that might be.
I think from my point of view, alarm bells rang when I heard that, because surely it's just going to push the price up. Well, they're still going to have to make the same amount of money, and it's an option. It doesn't mean that all students will take up the shorter contract length. They will still have the option to take the longer one, but there has to be an option. But I fear that those shorter contracts will just be more expensive than the longer contracts.
It's a really tricky one, this. Now, this was flagged to me before it became a bit of a thing, in that there were a couple of operators that were saying, look, we think this is going to blow up in the press. We're, just a bit of a heads up. They have been caught between doing what's right for the investor and doing what's right for the student. Most students want complete flexibility so that they can, move out as and when they finish their courses, if that's what they want to do. But some of them may want to stay for the 51 weeks and stay over the summer. That's fine. The investors in Ireland want simplicity and think that they can maximize their returns by having those 51-week term sessions and tenancy lengths. And again, I totally get that as well. I think it's just a really difficult place to be in, because the operators obviously want to please the students and their investors at the same time. And what's given here is the students and their satisfaction, because it came out in the Irish Times. They were all completely up in arms. And to name them, it's Aparto and Hugo have gone for 51-week contracts across the board. I've seen some others as well, but they haven't changed that, even though there's been uproar and the government has come out and said, if you won't do this voluntarily, we will come and mandate that you have to put 40, 41, 43 week term sessions and tenancy lengths in, and they still haven't changed away from 51 week term sessions. I've checked that this morning, so I know that that's all that's available. Maybe they did sell a few, maybe they've shut them down now. I just don't know. But the government in Ireland are due to come back fairly soon with a new policy that may well ban pure 51 weeks. They may have to have the option of 40 week odd tenancy or a 51 week tenancy. But will they hike the rates on the 43 week tenancy so it's sort of equivalent? I don't think they need to. Dublin in particular, Dublin, Cork, Limerick, there's several other places that would be pretty good in terms of summer revenue. The likes of Levander will be rubbing their hands if they can get, if it's mandated that there's 40 week tenancy lengths rather than the 51 weeks, because obviously in 51 weeks, Levander or the short-term operators can't get in there, or the language schools, they can't get in there and get the PBSA beds over the summer. So I do think there's something, I think there's a lot to play out here, but it does seem like the government's going to enforce it and mandate it at some point soon.
My question is what are those properties that have to do or are doing 51-week lease student only? So therefore, is there the same planning constraints that you can only put a student in that building? Because that's the thing that makes it more difficult to do that summer business. So it kind of feels that if you're going to go down that route from a legislation point of view, you need to make sure that there's flexibility around that summer period that actually opens up the opportunity, because that's the way that you can protect the rent for students, that actually then you can open it up to the wider market. And I just don't know if you're aware of what their thoughts are on that.
Well, it's all PBSA that are being told off, as it were. Yeah, what you're saying would make complete sense. I don't think the government in Ireland would take that approach to adjust planning to allow for flexibility over the summer, but I may be wrong. And that's definitely will be playing into the decision not to have any 40-week term sessions and to only have 51-week tenancy lengths. Because if you're an investor, you want the security of knowing exactly how many people you have in beds for a certain period of time. You want to maximize that occupancy. Ideally, if you can drive up the revenue, then great. But I think gone are the days where you can rely on the fact that if you have a 43-week term session, you can drive up the prices, yield up over the summer. I think there's more complications there in Ireland. I don't think that they're going to be able to increase the rents either. It seems like there would be the rental caps in place in those key locations where these PBSAs are located that would prohibit that, but I don't know exactly how that would work. I think the government have to get round the table with the likes of Hines or with GSA or with anyone else, who's the money behind the operators, to say, right, this is what we're planning. Can you work with us on it? Because I've got no doubt that everybody at Parto, Yugo, Homes for Students, wherever else, wants to make sure that the students are happy. They also want to deliver for their investors. So there is a bit of a fine line to be trod here, but there's such a shortage of accommodation out there that you can get away with, and I use that term carefully, you can get away with just doing 51 weeks because it's simple. It brings in, maximum revenue. I think there's an opportunity to do things slightly differently. I wouldn't want to see the government have to mandate it, but I'm pretty sure they will, because the markets are currently, self-governed and dictating that's the way that they want to run.
I think the other debate about it, talking about the summer business as well, is that threat to tourism as well. And obviously in some cities, I don't know if that's reared its head in Dublin specifically, but that's kind of where the planning permission has been so restrictive, really, is to, not have loads more beds come into a city that aren't needed in the summer, that would then threat the kind of traditional tourism. But I just can't see that, as you said, being an issue in Dublin, really. It feels like there's enough beds for everybody. There's enough business opportunities for everybody. And this has got to have been driven by students, potentially student unions. I was involved at the very beginning, more than 10 years ago, working for GSA, bringing kind of, actually before that, the Student Housing Company, bringing the first purpose-built student accommodation to Dublin. And it's amazing how the times have changed over the last decade or so. It was so welcomed, it was so needed, that nobody could believe that somebody was building purpose-built student accommodation in Ireland. And it turned very, very quickly when the prices got very, very high, very, very quickly, because they could. And I think the developers in Ireland have struggled with that ever since, really. But that shift from the first couple of years of being welcomed with open arms, loads of positive PR. We had government ministers cutting red ribbons, opening buildings. It was incredible. It was a wonderful, wonderful market to be involved in. And then everyone got a little bit too greedy with the rent and it just turned. And I think ever since then, there's been a real challenge between all of those different sort of fighting fractions, really. So, well, let's keep an eye on that one and see if any other cities kind of adopt that view. Obviously, we've got rent caps in other cities. So there's definitely a lot more focus, I think, on the sector, and that's probably set to grow.
Yeah, no, let's watch this space. So I think that's probably it for this episode. So thanks, guys, for a great chat, as always. Thank you to all those that are listening. We do appreciate your ongoing support, and we're pleased that from the feedback we're getting that people are enjoying it. So a big thank you. As ever, if there's anything that you want us to cover on any of the aspects of shared living, then please do get in touch. LinkedIn us, message us, whatever way you want to contact us, please do. Thanks again, and we will see you soon for episode 9, and have a lovely Easter.